it is time to turn our attentions to the Clonroad Garden Centre and welcome Judy Beck to studio for this week's In the Garden slot. Weather, no doubt, playing a big part in the jobs that you'll have lined up for people maybe at the end of today's particular slot. But tell us what's in store this morning.
Well, good morning. And this morning we're going to talk about growing lavender. And lavender is actually probably the plant we sell most of in the garden centre. It's hugely popular. But I suspect one of the reasons we sell so much is because people find it hard to grow. So they really want it, but after they buy it, they don't look after it properly, or they're not sure of the right conditions for it. And unfortunately, they die. So they come out and buy some more, which I suppose is good business for us. But we'd like everybody to be able to grow lavender. And it is, because of the scent and the look of the flowers and the varieties you can get, it is very understandable why it's so popular. But was just going to give some tips today on the best way to look after your lavender, the best way to prune it, how to grow it in a pot and all that kind of thing. So first of all, I suppose I should say there are two types of lavender. There is French lavender and English lavender. Broadly speaking, there are Dutch ones in that, but they wouldn't be so popular. So we'll be mostly talking today about English lavender and French lavender. And you pretty much look after them the same way. So lavender, of course, it's a Mediterranean plant, and we always think when we go to France and they have the lovely climate and we see fields of lavender, and we say, how can we replicate that in Ireland? So especially if you live, over on the west coast, we have a lot to deal with the salty winds and the rain and more rain and heavy soil. So we're trying to replicate what they have in the Mediterranean. So that is very well drained soil. Not necessarily doesn't have to be good soil, it can be poor soil, but what lavender hates is wet soil. So we need to, if you don't have nice free draining soil, we need to change the soil slightly. And you do that by adding sand and grit into your soil. So you make it more free draining, and so the water in the winter is not sitting on your lavender roots, and that is the primary killer of lavender in cold, wet climates like ours. So and what happens is that the roots rot over the winter and it just doesn't come back the second year. So what we're going to do is, now you can do this in a pot as well, and it might be even easier to grow it in a pot. So using John Ines's number 3 compost, which is soil-based compost, and adding plenty of grit. So you could do 2 parts compost, 1 part grit into the pot. And make sure it's a nice big pot, because you buy them nice small baby plants in the garden centre, not realising that these are actually going to grow quite big in 3 to 5 years. So if you start off with a nice big pot, really good drainage, and you might even use the little feet that go under pots to help again to improve the drainage, to give your lavender the best chance of success. And there is actually even, I don't know if people know, a lavender farm in Wexford. So it is farmed on large scale. I think they have 5 acres of lavender down there. Now I know they have more of sunny southeast climate, but it is possible in Ireland to grow it, and even in the west coast of Ireland. So as I was saying, there are the 2 types of lavender. There's the English lavender and the French lavender. Now the French lavender has a bigger flower, really, a slightly different flower, very, very pretty. Sometimes called bunny ears, because the top of the flower has got these look like little ears on the top of them. But the English lavender actually smells better, even though the flower might not be as pretty. It smells stronger and it's hardier. So it can even go down to quite low temperatures as long as the soil is not wet. So for best success, would recommend growing the English lavender. The French lavender is beautiful, but don't count on it coming back for a second year. Now, if you have a very sunny, very well protected courtyard, or you're prepared to bring it inside maybe for the winter, you could try doing the French lavender and getting it to go from year to year. But certainly for the best success, you would go with the English lavender. And there's lots of varieties of English lavender. People might have heard of Munstead, Hidcote, Vera. These would all be very popular varieties. They vary slightly in leaf colour and in colour of the flower, and sometimes in the heights of how high it's going to get. But otherwise very similar, and we have all those varieties in stock in Clonroad Garden Centre at the moment. So as I was saying, the sunniest part that you have of the garden, whichever part of the garden gets most sun during the day, it's not going to deal well with shade. And of course, we don't get a huge amount of sun in Ireland. So important that it's put whenever any sun comes out, that it gets that sun. And is staying away from anywhere that will get a cold wind tunnel. That's very important. For watering, it definitely needs to be watered until it gets established in the ground. Or, of course, it has to be watered in a pot. It can't be allowed dry out. But if it's in the ground, often after the first year, it is quite drought tolerant. But until those roots get established in the first year, very important to make sure that it is kept watered. Now, for pruning, and pruning is essential that it's done at the right time. And you do need to prune lavender, because otherwise it gets, I'm sure everyone has seen that real woody lavender. It gets very bushy, shabby looking, and that's because it's not being pruned correctly or pruned at all. And you need to start pruning your lavender the first year that you buy it, in order to keep it nice and compact and bushy and fresh looking. And the best time to prune it is after it's finished flowering. So that would be early autumn. You're talking around about September, and that gives it a chance to recover before the winter frosts come in. So you can prune it back reasonably hard to about a third of the size of the plant, and that opens up the inside of the plant and stops it from getting that kind of real bushy, shabby look. Doesn't regenerate from old wood, so important not to prune it back into wood, only into the green growth. Lavender, of course, you can give it another light prune in the spring if it needs it, if it doesn't look neat enough for you, but very important to prune it there in September. If you don't have a place that you can plant it into, as I was saying, you can grow it in a pot, but use the right kind of compost. And as I say, I recommend John Hines number 3 or even number 2, and mix that up with grit in order to get that nice free draining. So I hope you'll give that a go, Derrick, with your lavender planting.
You just wouldn't know. If we can get 5 minutes at all to have a look at it, we just might. You have a list of jobs for the week. Then before we get to our questions, we do of course have the €25 voucher for the Clonroad Garden Centre to give out as well. So get your texts in and your questions, and we'll pick a winner on that. But give us a couple of jobs.
So, of course, everyone knows we'll need to water, especially if you have your hanging baskets up and your summer flowers out in this weather, to keep on top of the watering. But a few other things: pruning your spring flowering shrubs. So shrubs that flowered earlier in the year and have finished flowering, now is the time to prune those. If you wait until the autumn to prune those, you will lose the flowers from next year. Your snails could be out in force. Lots of people in the garden centre saying they have lots of snails, and so a good idea to do evening hunts. So go out in the evening when the sun has gone down and pick up the snails and relocate them. Not over your neighbour's wall is probably not the best thing to do, but to bring them to an area where well away from your house, because apparently snails make their way back into your garden. Once they're happy in a home, they'll come back from quite a distance. So relocate them to another area. Rhubarb. Now is the time for picking rhubarb. Unless you planted it recently, if you planted it, say, last autumn, you wouldn't pick it this year. You have to wait another year, and then you won't even pick that much of it next year. It's the third year really that you can pick a proper crop. Strawberries, if your strawberry plants are putting out runners and you want to have good strawberries, a good idea to remove those runners, because the strawberries will put too much energy into producing the runners and not enough energy into producing fruit. So cut those runners off and give yourself a good chance of getting lots of lovely strawberry fruit.
Brilliant stuff. Good advice there as ever. Lavender is a theme of the texts that are coming in, Judy.
Okay.
One of them, just going to get it back up here in front of me. The Annie is after texting in, and she's asking, is it better to grow lavender from seed, cuttings or young plants?
Well, it's definitely easier from young plants. And if you're looking to do a lavender hedge, I should have mentioned that you can buy 6 packs of lavender, small plants, and it works out, they're €12 for the pack of 6. And that means they're only working out at €2 each. So if you want to do a lot of lavender, that's quite a good way to grow it. But if you're just doing 1 or 2 lavenders, better off get a substantial pot and use those. Now, you can grow lavender for cuttings. You can do that early summer or later on the hardwood cuttings in the autumn. But, if you only want a few plants, it's probably just easier to go out and buy them.
Lovely stuff. One here from Mary in Mullock this morning as well. Good morning to you, Mary. She says, please tell me when and how should I prune my heather bush as it has now finished flowering?
Well, now is the time to prune heather. As I was saying, winter flowering shrubs, you prune them now in the spring. You prune them now when they've finished spring flowering. So once the heather has gone over and the flowers gone off it, you can prune it.
Brilliant. Just another lavender related one here. It's more of a message of advice than anything else, but could Judy let the listeners know that lavender is highly toxic to cats, for anyone who may not know? Thanks from a cat lover.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thanks for that information.
Just to give that out to people there. Right, Tom is up next and he says, how do I get rid of wire worms in my garden? They're ruining his spuds, he says.
Oh, once you have wire worm, it's really hard to get rid of. The best thing you can do is leave it and don't put potatoes into that ground for a few years, because you're just making the situation worse and worse. So you have to kind of let them die out themselves naturally. So yeah, I'm sorry. Often it'll occur if potatoes are planted in the same place a few years running. So, and they build up in the soil. So unfortunately, not good news. If you have a different part of the garden, you can put your potatoes into, do that well away from that area, but leave the area with the wireworm well alone, and don't plant them back in there for a few years.
I hope that helps, Tom. Next one's from Mary in West Clare. She says, when I try to grow cauliflowers, they don't get a compact head. Why does that happen?
It's probably a lack of something in the soil. It might be boron. I'm trying to remember. There's some nutrient in the soil that's missing. So that's why it's not forming the head. So if she wants to come in and see me, and we can discuss that further, but there's some nutrient missing. I'll have to do a little bit of research. Okay. Something missing from the soil that's causing that. Okay,
head to the Clonroad Garden Centre then, Mary, is the advice there. Pam has texted in this morning, are coffee grounds good for my garden? Are there any plants I should avoid putting them on?
So coffee grounds, from what I have read, they have minimal use in the garden. I'm actually trialling them to keep cats out of my garden at the moment, because I've heard they're good for that, and they seem to be kind of working. I'm not sure if it's that or my Jack Russell listing there, but I think it might be helping. But as nutrient wise, I'm not using them as a nutrient. You might get some use out of them. I don't think there's any plants that they'd be bad for. Now, I don't put them right up against the stem of my plants. I just put it on the soil. And but a customer last week was telling me they have loads of nutrients in them. So I might have to do further research on that. But I think if you're looking for nutrients for your garden, use something that's got a balanced fertiliser, such as fish blood and bone, to give proper nutrients into the soil.
Very good. Now, I'm either going to get this spot on or make a right bag's dinner of it all together, but Agapanthus, is that how it's pronounced?
Agapanthus.
I was close.
I'd say it's Agapanthus.
I just paid too much respect to the H.
Names can be hard.
Anyway, whatever you said it was, foliage grew well last year, but it didn't flower. What can I do now to ensure that it will flower this year? Many thanks from Mary in Ennis.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Mary. Well, assuming that you have it in the sun and that your soil is free draining, again, it's another Mediterranean plant, so it wants free draining soil. And I'm wondering if your soil is very rich, because if for some plants like these, if you have too rich a soil, you'll get loads of greenery and you just won't get enough flowers. So I'm wondering if you've added an abundance of nutrients into it. If you are going to apply nutrient, it should really only be potash based, which promotes flowering, and don't put in a nitrogen based fertiliser. Nitrogen produces lots of green growth. Like, for example, chicken manure pellets would be full of nitrogen, but you'll get lots of green growth and not enough flowers. So it sounds healthy anyway, so there's still plenty of hope for it, but I wouldn't add anything except something like tomato feed to it. Don't give it any rich fertiliser. It's not going to help the Agapanthus.
Okay, very well. That's every day is a school day. I always say that, and that's something new learned today now. Final one here is from Pat, and I think he might be in the running for a 25-euro voucher, but he's asking, can I put liquid cow manure into my buxus plant after trimming? It's in a pot.
I think liquid cow manure would be a very high nutrient feed. So there is actually a feed for buxus that you should use, because my worry would be if you give it too high of a nutrient feed, you're going to get lots of soft growth on your buxus. Now, buxus are meant to grow very slowly and very densely, so you don't want lots of soft growth. Buxus is already very prone to getting the moth caterpillar and very prone to box blight. So there's a couple of buxus feeds on the market, and one in particular, I think it's called Top Health for buxus, and that is to prevent this very prevalent, unfortunately, box blight and the moth caterpillar from attacking your buxus. So my advice would be not to use any kind of cow manure, and to use either don't use anything at all, or else use the box feed on it. And of course, with box, very important in this weather to keep it watered. They can go brown quite easily if they dry out.